So hello everyone, I'm Steffen speaking here. Welcome to today's webinar and glad that you made it. We are going to wait just for a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, before we will actually start and proceed with today's skill training webinar. Okay, a couple of words regarding today's agenda. So in the first stage, we're going to have a quick motivation of the use case that we're going to be tackling today. The use case will be located in the area of finance. We are then going to implement this use case by means of a skill. So you will have the possibility to watch and also hands-on implement one of the Action Engine skills. This will be the major part of today. In a third step, we will then deal with the question of which use case categories do exist and how can you discover and collect use cases with your customers. And in a fourth step, we're going to deal with next steps and Q&A. That being said, let's kick it off and let's start with the motivation. As depicted, we are going to look at the CFO of a company, and we're asking ourselves, what are the major strategic initiatives for a CFO? According to recent reports by PwC, there are 3 core pillars to be addressed. One question is, how can we optimally manage and reduce working capital? In fact, across globally listed companies, actually there are 1.3 trillion euros, that's like more than 5% of the United States national debt, that could be released off the balance sheets if working capital was improved. With more and more invoices being processed, a natural question also is, how can we raise both productivity and automation? And last but not least, 79% of CFOs are concerned about risk and compliance, as this also has, of course, a high impact on penalties and regulatory requirements in general. So why is it so difficult to address these pillars? And if we pick working capital, what's the challenge in actually optimizing working capital? Well, it all boils down to having frictionless processes across the different systems and departments. So if we think about working capital, it actually starts in procurement, where the question is, how can we guarantee optimally inventory levels, and how do we guarantee that we have ideal payment terms in place? The question is also related to vendor management, in the sense that how can we guarantee that our suppliers are reliable and are not delivering earlier or later than expected, impacting our working capital here? How can we guarantee that we are fully utilizing all the contracts that we have? It proceeds with accounts payable. As an example, how can we incentivize optimal payment behavior and make sure that we have a high ratio of on-time payments? With respect to compliance, how can we make sure to adhere to regulatory requirements and not induce any compliance issues there? And last but not least, among several other examples, how can we make sure that our master data is up to date as a necessary requirement to have automation in place actually? While this is somehow the challenge of working capital, it's also obvious that that there are difficulties to actually work on that. And to our mind, it mainly has to do with what we call operational friction. Across these processes, you have our customers typically have different pain points to be addressed. As an example, in procurement, you might observe manual changes of the payment terms, affecting your working capital. In vendor management, you might observe that you have missing order confirmations with respect to your suppliers, or that your suppliers deliver rather early or late in time. In the accounts payable process, you might not manage to pay your invoices in time, therefore not fully exploiting the cash discounts that could be realized. You might have issues in compliance by means of invalid VAT numbers, preventing you for both paying and issuing the right invoices. And last but not least, when we look at the master data, you might also have outdated payment terms there, meaning that whenever you receive an invoice by the supplier, it might not coincide with your master data, therefore causing manual interventions and causing automation to drop. So how do we tackle this issue? And how do we tackle this issue today in the webinar? And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the accounts payable example and on the question, how can we fully realize cash discounts? For this particular question, as for any other question, the Celonis framework is generally split in 3 parts, which we call discover, enhance, and monitor. First, in the discover part, it's about revealing the inefficiencies and actually finding out why and where do we observe or have we observed cash discount losses in the past. That's then the starting point for enhancing ourselves by means of intelligent actions, as an example, how to intervene in open invoices to fully realize the cash discount there. So that's really the action part. And last but not least, we can monitor that by means of the involvement over time to make sure we're actually on track. Today, or in today's training, we're going to focus on the enhance part. And the action engine is actually the driver of this enhance part. It's really helping you to proactively act on what we're going to do today. So that will be the area of focus for today. Now, just one slide on what the action engine is doing for those who have never experienced it. Celonis in general, and like the process mining technology in general, consists of extracting and connecting all the data that you have across the systems and across the different heterogeneous operational systems that are present across your processes. While previously or currently you might be looking back with the discover part to look at your process flow, identify inefficiencies in your as-is process, and also find the root causes there. We want to address the question how to act in a forward-looking way. So for the invoice example of today, having received an invoice, what's our next best action? How can we enhance ourselves and proactively act on this invoice to make sure that we're addressing the target KPIs such as cash discount realization? And that's precisely what the action engine is all about. So in one sentence, it will help you, and with you I mean your workforce, to derive and trigger intelligent actions. And all of this is being based on the concept of what we call skills, which will be the central element of today's training. So how does this look like? How can we imagine this in a quick demo? And I will only address this for 2 minutes. So how will it look like for the business user? For the business user, it's actually very, very easy to work with the action engine. And actually, that's the outcome of our implementation today. So me as a business user, I will be proactively approached by the action engine. As an example, I will receive an email at 8 a.m. in the morning telling me, hi, we have detected 4 new so-called signals for you, 4 new incidents. And one of these incidents might be that I'm asked to remove a certain payment block to realize the cash discount for a particular invoice. For me, that's the simple entry point for entering the action engine and work from there. So now I'm in the login mask, I'm entering my credentials, and as a result, I will now see those 4 signals that have just been depicted in the email. For me as a business user, it's really, really trivial. So what I'm going to do is I can click on one of these signals to really act on it. And once I do this, I actually already see what it's all about. And this is just a minimal example. So in this example, I'm being told that for a particular invoice, there is still a payment block in place. And actually, it tells me that there are only 6 days left until the cash discount due date is approaching. And it also highlights, it's not shown here actively, but it also highlights that in the meantime, we have actually received all the goods from the supplier and all the other surroundings necessary to trigger the payment. So for me, that's all the context-sensitive information that I need basically to then take action on the right-hand side. And also what we're going to do today is create several of these actions But for the business user, it's just about clicking on the button to actually execute the action. And in this example, what we're executing is basically a workflow in the SAP system to trigger the payment block removal in SAP. So that's why now, as a result, basically the signal has been set to progress automatically. And as soon as the payment is done, and as soon as the cash discount has been realized, this will simply vanish from my list and I'm good to go. So that's actually how the business user will interact with the Action Engine. So in short, it's simply about receiving a message, open the signals in Action Engine, and execute actions across different operational systems. We have just seen it by means of an SAP example. However, we have just depicted one role in this quick introduction up to now. We have dealt with the business user. In general, the business user will be the one working with the Action Engine on a daily basis. And just to be clear about that, we imagine everyone in the company to be a daily consumer of the Action Engine, from keyline user to manager. And the reason is that we want to have this so easy that you do not need any training, but it's simply something like a natural assistance in your working day to help you concentrate on your tasks and get intelligent recommendations for whatever could be beneficial for you. On the other side, as a second user role, we have what we call skill master. The skill master is responsible for setting up use cases, or skills as we call them. And this is typically the Celonis analyst. So if you're already working with Celonis, it's similar to the person who would create a Celonis analysis. This person can be located in the business or IT. In any way, we are highly encouraging a self-service possibility to set up these skills. And in today's training, we will really deal with the skill master piece. So we will have a deep dive into the application, and you will see how to set up skills and experience that yourself. That being said, let's already jump into the skill training, and let's quickly talk about what this is all about before working mainly within the application. The training goals with respect to the skill training is actually that, first of all, you get to understand the structure of Action Engine. So how does the configuration side of it look like? In particular, I want you to get to know the concept of skills. What is a skill? Which elements does it have? How do I configure these elements such that you're able to set up your first own skill, either now by acting within your IBC team or as a simple follow-up by getting access after the webinar. And once you basically have this technical enablement, as one could say, we also want you to get to know the most common use cases, because I want you to know, how do I find these use cases? How do I interact with the business? And how do I drive this forward within my company or within my clients? That being said, let's start with the concept of skills. So that's now a very important concept on the next two slides. As stated previously, the basis of everything are the different operational systems that you have in place, which you can see at the bottom. So it's basically the digital backbone of all your operations across the systems. What the process mining technology is doing, I've outlined it before, it's extracting and connecting this data to reconstruct the as-is process flow. And in like the Celonis language, this means that you are creating different data models for different kinds of processes. As an example, you will have a purchase to pay data model for the purchasing part, an order to cash data model, accounts payable data model, IT service management, or also any other custom data model for a custom system or process. Now, the skill of the Action Engine is placed on top of these data models. So from a high-level perspective, a skill will retrieve data from one or several data models. It will then enrich this data with the details, with the actions, with the communication, what you have seen. and it will also be able to push data back into the operational systems by means of the actions, by means of the workflow example that we have seen initially. These action engine skills, and that's the important part, they are executed continuously and automatically. So you do not have to watch out anymore. You do not have to manually investigate, but as soon as you have set up a skill, the skill will basically do the job and will automate your analytics, if you want to call it like this. How does a skill look like, and what are the different elements of a skill? And if we come back to the initial example of removing the payment block, then those are 5 elements that we have to address. And this is precisely what you will be configuring when setting up a skill. The first element are what we call signals. So if you have a skill that says remove payment block to realize cash discount, then each outcome of the skill, each incident, is what we call a signal. So in the live demo, we have basically seen 4 signals for this particular skill. Remove payment block for invoice 1, for invoice 2, for invoice 3 and 4. The second thing that characterizes a skill is the routing. The routing determines which business user interacts with which signal. So in the example, we have only seen that I have received all of these signals. However, in a real life scenario, you might have different accountants like Liam and Claudia being responsible for different vendors. And this routing basically depicts which business user is acting on which signals. And that's also something that you can configure. And as a third element, you can depict the details. So in short, all the context relevant information that should be attached to the signal such that the business user can act on it. Coming back to the payment term example, this could be the vendor name. This could be the indicator that the original payment block has been set due to an incomplete delivery. And this could also be the information that in the meantime, the delivery has been completed, which is basically the trigger for creating the signal and indicating that the payment block can be removed in the first place. These details then motivate the business users to take action. And in this training, we will also see which action we can take, how to configure them. And in this example, we've seen the trigger of the payment block removal in SAP. And also, as a last element, you can configure the communication. So you can decide when the action engine will approach your business users, be it immediately for real-time incidents, be it at fixed times on working days, depending on which kind of use cases you are working on. So how can we set up skills, and which ways exist to set up these skills? And in general, there are 3 different ways how you can come up with skills. And you could also argue that some of the best ways here on the one on the top, and then you proceed downwards. One way to create skills is to use the Celonis App Store. So what we are doing is we are enriching our App Store with more and more skills that we recognize to be valuable for many clients, and we offer them to you as templates. So you can simply download them and start setting up the skill from there. As a second way, you can create a skill out of a Celonis analysis. So I think that's a very, very nice connection between both worlds, because you can jump into a Celonis analysis, discover the use case, identify root causes, and then easily create a skill out of the analysis to make sure that whenever this appears, you're acting on it and you're acting in the right way. And as a last possibility, you can build skills directly from scratch in Action Engine, so you can also configure everything there. In today's training, we are going to focus on the second possibility. So I will show you how to create signals and skills out of a Celonis analysis, as I think this will be also the main use case that you will be facing when working with clients or on your own clients. That being said, let's really come to the hands-on session, and let's deal with the question, how can we set up skills and actually set up our own skill. Just as some pre-word for the training, you get your own Celonis IBC team with demo data. So I hope that most of you have received an invitation email of the Celonis Cloud in the meantime. In case you haven't, please don't worry, simply drop me an email or might also be sent within the next minutes, but still you can follow easily and learn the same things. We will also gonna send solution sketches afterwards. Anyway, all of you will receive a team that will be valid until December 31. So you can play around in it. You can use it for internal demo purposes. You can just use it for becoming the perfect Action Engine master. And again, if anything does not work, please do not be sad, but simply drop me an email and we can easily work on that. So if you have received an invitation email, maybe you've already done that, but just also for everyone, how does this work? All of you have or will receive an invitation email by the Celonis Cloud. So the email subject of this will be Aaron Andrio invited you to join on Celonis Cloud. And within this email, simply click on join the team. Once you click on that, you will be forwarded, or your browser will be opened, and you will have the possibility to sign up, so to depict your password for your account. I will already encourage you to bookmark this URL such that you can easily access your team later on. And also, just if you also have forgotten to do point number 2, the logic will be as follows. If your email, like my email is s.schenk@celonis.com, the corresponding team URL until you can access your team until December 31 will be https skill minus your email address basically .u-1.celonis.cloud. Anyway, we're gonna send these slides for sure. We're also gonna send around the recording of this webinar, so you can also look up all of this. I will just now wait for 1 minute for those of you who have received this email in the meantime, such that you have the possibility to actually create this team. So please, let's wait for 1 minute only and then continue with the next steps. All right, so I hope you have created or have been able to create your account. If not, as I said, don't worry. So now, basically what you will have is you will now have the possibility to log into your team. So this is the sign-up mask for your team. Mine is called as follows for this training, and I can simply use my account to log in. Now, I just have one more slide as a preparation before we can actively start. Because once you log into your team, you will recognize that you do not see any Action Engine signals yet. However, for each of you, we have created demo signals and skills that you can have a look at for further enablement. So what we're gonna do now, and I will show you how to do is, are 3 simple steps. In a first step, we are gonna enter the team settings of our Intelligent Business Cloud team. Then we're gonna look at a particular user group, which is called users that see demo signals. And we're gonna add ourselves to this group. And then after at most 5 minutes for the repeated skill execution and synchronization, you will see your demo signals to look at. So how do these steps look like? Now, basically, you see the overview of your Intelligent Business Cloud team. So in step 1, I will click on my logo in the top right and enter the team settings. In a second step, I will navigate to the groups on the left-hand side. where now I see this group called users that see demo signals. And now we have to navigate to the right side of this group, click on the three dots, and open the members menu. If you now click on it, you probably see that you do not have any members within this team, which is why you can simply click on Add Members in the top right. And in the resulting mask, simply choose yourself, so your email address as the user to be added. So basically, I can't add myself because I'm already part of this group, but for you, just choose your user and click on Add Members in the bottom right. And that's it already. So now you can close this menu. And once you now go to the Action Engine application, which can be found in the top header, you will spot all the demo signals to have a look at. As said, this can take up to 5 minutes, so don't worry, but then you will see it and you can actually look at the different use cases within accounts payable already. And we actually also see the result of today's training, which is remove payment block to realize cash discount. As you see for this demo example, we have created different signals across different assignees. So we have Claudia as an accountant working on payment block removals as well as optimizing invoice payment terms. We have Liam as another accountant working on parts of the payment block removals as well as on resolving three-way match failures, so inconsistencies between purchase order, goods receipt, and invoice. And we also have Nora as a master data manager, so a different type of user who is concerned with correcting outdated VAT numbers and also updating master data payment terms. Please play around with these signals, also enter these signals because they will nicely show how you can interact with the different use cases and which actions you can actually trigger. So for this particular example, requesting approval, as you can see, I have actually created an email pre-populated with the incident, like the vendor and the payment terms, which is another action that you can include. All right, but let's now start with setting up our first own skill. And as said, we're going to focus on creating skills out of a Celonis analysis. So that's why we're going to go to the process analytics application in the top left. There we see one and only one analysis, so the discover part, that deals with the topic of cash discounts. If we click on this particular analysis, we obviously enter it, and we see just a general analysis of our current cash discount performance. If we look at the top row, we see that we have 9,460 open invoices that result in an open invoice value of 48.8 million euros. And importantly, we observe that we have a possible cash discount of 466,000 euros. As additional information, we see the days until cash discount due date. So how many days are left until we miss this due date. We also see whether a payment block has been set at the moment, preventing us from executing the payment. We see the different amounts of the invoices, so whether those are like low value invoices or high value invoices larger than 1,000 euros. And we also see a detailed list of every item. So with the company code, the document number, and the invoice value of the single invoice. Besides that, we obviously also see the process flow for these invoices. So how can we now easily identify relevant incidents, and how can we create a skill from there? And in the first step, I will just briefly touch on the discover part. So in this analysis, what I would be interested as a business analyst, I would be interested in the invoices that are likely to become overdue within the next 10 days. So invoices at risk, basically. So I will select those two bars within the chart, confirm the selection to only look at invoices within the next 10 days. While I think the ones without payment block will be paid automatically by means of our payment run, I am especially concerned about the ones with a payment block in place. So I will select those ones, confirm the selection, focus on them. Regarding the cash discount amount, I mean, I should worry about every euro, but for the sake of illustration, I'm actually especially interested about invoices with a possible cash discount of more than 1,000 euro each. So I'm gonna also restrict the analysis to this subset, now ending up with 12 invoices. And very interestingly, and that's where basically the whole process connection comes into place. If I now have a look at my process, and if I now basically raise the activity slider to see all the activities that have been going on in my process up to now for these open invoices, I see that for 12 open invoices, 4 of them are affected by a payment block that has been set after entering the invoice in SAP. The reason for these payment blocks being that the delivery has not yet been completed by the supplier. So we basically have recognized that we have an incomplete delivery, so we have set a payment block to not trigger the payment for that, right? But what we also see in the Process Explorer, that meanwhile, the record goods receipt has taken place. So actually the original reason for setting the payment block has been gone, which is why now we are basically good to go to remove the payment block. But as this is a manual activity, we have to make sure that the removal of the payment block is done immediately, on time, and just in time to not exceed the cash discount due date. So as a last step, I will basically filter on the connection here, ending up with these 4 invoices only. And now we end up with the details table. So this details table now shows all the 4 items that we're looking at. And what we want to do is we want to build a skill around this details table. How can this be done? And this can be done by precisely this roll up to skill functionality that I've talked about, meaning that you just have to click once on the table header before you spot this little symbol here, which indicates that you can create a new skill out of this table. So what you can do is, after having applied all this detection logic, so to speak, we can simply click on the table and click on the button to create a new skill. We can now give the skill a name, and I would always recommend to give it an actionable name, because the name we enter here will be the name that's being displayed to our business users. So it should be a call to action. And in our example, I will call it training, just for the sake of illustration, but the real name would be remove payment block to realize cash discount. And this would be everything I have to do before I can send this query to the Action Engine. So if I now click on the Action Engine, I have to choose the data model on which this is being executed. So we only have this one accounts payable data model. And as a result, we basically see the same kind of signals that we have seen in the analysis. What has happened in the meantime, so something very powerful that you have not noticed, you couldn't notice, is that all the filters that we have set in the analysis, they have been imported. So you could look at it. It's quite a long statement because it's like a complicated thing to detect. You could also add further skills and further filters if you wanted to fine-tune that. But the nice thing is that we actually already done. We've done it in the analysis. So now I can click on the Save button before I'm asked to detect or select the so-called signal ID. What is that? Well, the signal ID is the unique identifier for each signal. So we have to make sure that we select a unique pair of columns that uniquely characterizes the signal. That's a technical requirement that we have to do. And for us, this means one invoice is uniquely characterized by the company code, the fiscal year, the document number, and the line item. That's it. You only have to specify this once and initially, so please make sure to do it properly. You can still change it, but typically it's just an initial setup. So now, when clicking Save, we end up in this menu, which is basically the heart of the Action Engine. So I can increase the screen a little bit. This is now the configuration perspective of one particular skill, which we called training remove payment block. And what we have done up to now, we have configured the signals. So we have now detected the realizable cash discounts. And from now on, Action Engine will do this automatically. So the 4 signals might be 5 in a minute, might be 3 in 2 minutes. So this will constantly be updated whenever the data model is subject to changes. As motivated very initially when introducing the concept of skills, we now have to think about, or we can think about, how to distribute these signals to our business users, which context-sensitive information to add, which actions to add to these signals, and also which communication to establish for this particular skill. For now, and that would also be my general recommendation, we will proceed in a prototypical manner, meaning that we won't do anything else than enabling the skill. This can be done by enabling the skill in the top right and switching the button. So now it's already active, it's in place. What does that mean for us? If we now basically go or click on the back button in the top left here, we see that we have created this new skill. And besides the data model and the so-called skill owner that has created the skill, we also see whether and what has been the last execution date. Just for your information, this can take up to 1 minute until the skill is being executed. Each minute it will be checked basically whether there are changes that should be checked for. And in our case, I see that actually it has been executed already. So everything is good to go. Meaning that when I now go back to the projects by clicking on the top left, and when I now enter the signal list that we have shown in the business, that we have seen in the business user demo, I will see these 4 new items that I've created. So it's actually as easy as that, coming up with the first skill. Though it's a complex logic, we were able to easily reproduce it in the analysis and now automatically analyze it by means of the skill. Obviously, I'm the assignee for now, so we haven't taken care of that yet. And if I click on this particular signal, we basically see that we see nothing, meaning that while we see the attributes that we have depicted in the signal itself, actually you can also copy them to the clipboard if you want to enter them in another system. Besides that, we neither see any signal details nor any actions to take. And also we have assigned all signals to me and me only. So now we're gonna step by step enrich this skill and become really sophisticated with respect to that. So to go back, we can enter, and that's where you always have to enter when configuring skills, to the so-called projects. So what is a project? A project is nothing else than a collection of skills. So it's just a set of skills. It's basically something like a folder. And the reason is that if you have a larger company and different departments, you obviously want to have one project for each department, such that each department can maintain and create skills separately. It also has to do with the permission management possibilities that you have. Anyway, for us, we see that in the project, we have this one training skill. And if I click on it, I come back to the heart of the Action Engine as I motivated initially. Now, as a second step, we are going to add the routing. So we are going to distribute these signals, not to me, but to several users. And to do that, you can basically, you can just click on the configure button And you can now either choose an existing rule. So as said, I've already created some for this training, and you can have a look at it to see what can be done here. But we are going to create a new routing rule. For creating new routing rules, you have 3 different options. I will only outline 2 of them because 2 of them are quite similar. The first option is to route all signals to many users. So if I click on that, or if I clicked on that, I could just add 1 or several users, and all of them would see all of these signals. In addition to that, as a second option, you can choose to distribute the signals based on a data model column. What's the main use case here? Well, typically in purchasing, as an example, you have the so-called purchasing group. So who's the responsible purchaser for a particular purchase order? And you can use this data model column to distribute different purchasing groups to different purchases. There's a third example, which is somehow similar to that one. You can distribute the signals based on the signal attributes. So just recall that our signal had several columns or attributes like company code, invoice number, vendor number, invoice value, and you can also split and basically assign the signals based on these attributes. This is very powerful, and actually we will now do this kind of distribution. So obviously we can give it a name. I will just call it training routing rule before adding now the first user. When I click on add user, I can decide who should be assigned to these signals. And as this is an operational skill, I will assign Liam and Claudia as an example. So I will start with Liam. If I click on Liam, I can now decide which conditions to be applied to forward these 4 incidents to Liam. And obviously I will just add a condition here. And the condition now allows me to choose any of the signal attributes, so any of the columns in our signal table. As an example, I will choose to split the signals with respect to the company code. And now I can decide which values should be assigned to Liam. So now I see basically all the different company codes that we have already derived from the data. And maybe I decide that Liam should only be subscribed to the attribute 1000, so company code 1000. By applying that, it's already in place. And as a last option, I can decide to also assign Liam to the signals by default. By default means that in the assignee column that we've seen in the signal overview, he will be the one who will be assigned here. So now I can click assign, that's it. And I can do the same thing for Claudia, the other accountant. I can add a condition. Sorry if I'm too fast, but I think it's enough for you at this point if you just get the first concept. I can add the company code, this time maybe choose 2000, also assign her, apply, and now finally save it. Now we have successfully established the second part of the routing rule. So this means that whenever new signals appear, they will be distributed to Liam and Claudia according to the company code 1000 and 2000. Please keep in mind that the old signals, so the 4 signals that have already been created in the past, will not be reassigned. So the customer feedback was that we should not do that. So it's only for new signals that the new routing will be in place. If you want to also apply this new routing rule logic to the old signals, you have to go back to your project and open the project for the skill list. And when you now have a look at your training skill, you can click on the 3 dots on the right-hand side and click on the Reset Assignments button. So this, as it says here, will execute the skill and reassign also the previous signals. So if I do that, that's actually been taken care of. And now the new assignment is in place. Meaning that just as before, if we now go back to the projects, And if we click on the signal list, we will actually see that the 4 signals that we have created, sorry, how did we call them? Sorry, I made I forgot one thing. So obviously I do not see the signals anymore because only Liam and Emma can see and Claudia can see them. So what I have to do is I also have to add myself as a user. Sorry for this interruption. So I won't put any conditions to myself. So I will see all signals actually. And if I now save it, have a look at the skill list. So now I have to wait until it is re-executed again. But in a minute, we will basically then see, like now, that if I go back to the projects and if I click on the signal list, we have the 4 training signals in place, and Liam and Claudia are split across them. Actually, was also a good thing that I made this mistake, because now you can see that also several people can be assigned to a signal. So several people can see a signal, but only one person at a time can be the assignee that's currently working on it. All right, let's now have a look, and let's proceed with the configuration of the skill. Namely, let's now look at the signal details. That's actually an easier part. If we click on the signal details, we have the possibility to either enter a description on the top that will be displayed to the business user, and or add a details table at the bottom. What's the main use case for this? Well, in general, in the details table, you can either add further attributes, like if you want to have additional information on the materials that have been purchased, or other details, you can add them here. Or also the second kind of typical application is to add the process flow. So if you add the details table, you can add 1 or several columns from your data model. And a nice thing that you can do that also underlines what we're aiming at is you can add the activity for this particular case. So what has happened in the process for this invoice? And this way, for the payment term example, you would see that the goods receipt has been recorded after the payment block has been set. And you can also display that to your business user. I mean, for the sake of illustration, I can also just add it here. I do not even need the case key. I can hit apply, and then you would see what has happened at which point in time. We can also enter a description here. So this description will be the call to action for the business user. So as an example, I could say for document number, and now I want to dynamically show the document number that is affected. The good thing here is that we already have placeholders referring to the signal attributes that we have. So I can say for document number and item goods receipt has been recorded, yet payment block is still set. Please check and remove payment block if applicable. If I now click on the refresh button in the preview, I see how the business user would basically, how it will look like to the business user, but now we're already good to go. So again, I can hit the save button. I could go back to the projects. I could enter the skill list. And now, once the skill is being rerun, I would also see that actually we now have a description in place. For the rest of the webinar, and as a next step, we will then focus on also like part of the action engine, literally, which are the actions. So I would like to wait until it is executed just for a couple of seconds, such that you can actually see it. And as the action, we will actually focus on 3 different types of actions, such that you also see the variety of actions that could be taken here. We can also proceed now. Jumping into the skill configuration, let's now have a look at the action part. And let's now click on Add Action to see which actions can be attached. And actually, this is becoming larger and larger over time. So that's just a set that's possible by now. And let me walk you through what is possible by now. So a very easy thing that you can do is you can display a pop-up. So you can give the action a name, which will be the name of the button to be clicked on. So we can call it show additional information. And as soon as the user clicks on this button, the information depicted here will be displayed. So we could call it call vendor. And then if we had the vendor number in our signal attribute, we could show this, just as a very simple example. We could add further actions, as an example, dealing with pre-filled email drafts. So especially if you think about communicating with external users, like your suppliers, or also with other people within your company, you can trigger these email drafts out of Action Engine. So you can call it create email as an action. You can depict the recipients, the subject, and also the message, again, using these placeholders. So maybe your recipient is always, say, a particular vendor. Let's do it like this, particular vendor that you want to write, depending on the signal that you're looking at. In the subject, you can also incorporate the document number as a placeholder if you would like to have it like this. We will rather choose an internal person as the recipient, like employee A at mycompany.com. Please remove payment block for document. And then in the email, hey, I have noted that the payment block can be removed. Can you please do it? And then something like this maybe. Anyway, if we hit apply, we have configured this action, and we also will see the result in a minute. As a third step, you can obviously open a URL to jump into your web applications. So I won't show this example, but if you have a Salesforce system, if you have a ServiceNow system, also if you have a web client for your SAP system, you can approach already the transaction that you want to have by means of a parameterized URL. And now, depicting the special case of SAP, we can also interact with SAP in different ways. So as one example, let me also motivate it like this. There are different levels of integration with respect to SAP. So there's a very lightweight version that you can do immediately and set up immediately without any IT involvement. And there's also a deep integration with respect to actually executing workflows via the REST API provided by SAP. Let's start with the lightweight version, and let's have as an action simply generate a transaction. I will show you what that means in a second. So generate an SAP transaction means that we are able to create a parameterized SAP comment, like the classical SAP transaction, enriched with the parameters of the invoice. And the user can then simply paste this comment in his SAP GUI. When the user then executes this pasted command, he will already be navigated to this transaction with the right parameters to save time. So we can call it generate transaction, remove payment block. And actually we have already incorporated different templates that you could use, but you can also type in a customized command. As an example, if you want to change an invoice, which we want to do for the particular example of removing a payment block, you just click on it, and as a result, you already see the SAP specific command, which is FB02, and you already see the parameters that you can insert into this command to have this parameterized transaction. And in this example, we have to insert the document number. So I can simply select this and replace it by the dynamic document number of our signal. We have the company code, which I can replace by the company code here. And we have the fiscal year, which I can incorporate here. So if I now hit apply and save, actually I have created 3 actions already. And I think that's also a good point in time to look at what these actions actually do. So again, if I jump back, I see that the skill has just been executed. If I now go back to the projects and to my signal list, and if I click on this one particular signal, then now we see that we have both the description in place, as well as the details for the process flow. And we've also added several actions. So as an example, we have added the pop-up. If I click on that, it will simply display me this additional information. We have the possibility to write an email to the responsible person. So if I click on that, as you can see, my Outlook opens and everything is pre-filled to save time and already enter the parameters. And we have this generate SAP transaction. So if I click on that, we've basically generated this SAP command, and I could now click on copy to clipboard, and then it won't show it, but then I could enter my SAP system and simply enter it in the transaction field in the top left of SAP. And this would then execute this transaction with the parameters as some sort of navigation shortcut, if you want to call it like this. Last but not least, going back to my projects and entering this skill, we can deal with the topic of communication. So that's actually very, very trivial when it comes to the configuration, because you simply can click on configure, and now you can choose between 2 options. So either you immediately notify users whenever new signals occur. So that's, as an example, important when it comes to sending express deliveries to your customers. So something really urgent. Also, we have a really exotic example in the area of aviation, where it's about on-time plane maintenance for on-time, for on-time flights. The second option is to rather have specified times in which you receive all incidents or signals across the skills that you have set up. So also a classical example is to choose the work days here, choose your time zone, like Berlin in my example, and then specify maybe the morning, 8 o'clock, and after lunch as those times where I want to receive all incidents and signals and intelligent actions that have appeared in the meantime, as I said, across the different skills. And that's it, actually. So when you do this for your team and when you configure all of that, you will actually receive the email that I have shown you initially. So you will basically, after setting up the skill, you will receive this email with training remove payment block to realize cash discount. And then you basically can do the very same thing that I have done in this demo. So those are the main aspects. I just wanted to show one more thing. I want to outline it, and I encourage you also to play around with it, because I don't have the time to go into that in detail, but what we can also do, which I've shown in the very initial example for the business user, we can also create workflows for deeper integration in the operational systems. So this is something that we're heavily pushing right now. and which is going to be extended. And what you can do here is you can create a new workflow, like remove payment block in SAP. And now basically you have an interface to configure the workflow that you want to trigger with an action. And the nice thing is we can use Action Engine as a trigger. So I can use the Celonis trigger, and I can now specify which input parameters I want to provide this trigger. And let me explain it like this. You want to remove a payment block in SAP. So that's why you have set up a workflow in SAP that requires 4 parameters, like the company code, the fiscal year, the invoice number, and the line item number. What we now want to do with this workflow, we want to trigger this SAP workflow and already providing the 4 parameters this workflow in SAP requires. So I know I'm being fast, but I just want you to see it. So what I can do actually, I can say, okay, my input or my workflow in SAP requires 4 input parameters, company code, fiscal year, document number, line item. I could then actually, as a block, add actions. So whenever the Celonis trigger is activated, I can trigger one of the actions. So you can configure a whole action workflow here. As an example, you could trigger this cloud platform workflow in SAP, but you could also, if you're dealing with Jira, you can create or change tickets. You can trigger bots in your RPA system, like intelligently triggering UiPath bots. The same would apply for Salesforce. And as you see, there's a variety of systems that can be integrated here. You can send Slack messages, so the universe is very, very wide. So we can have a whole other webinar on this topic. For now, I will just publish it like it is. I will jump back to the Action Engine, to the project part. And if I now go to the actions of my skill, the nice thing is that I can execute a Celonis workflow. I can select the workflow that I've just created, and I can now pre-fill the parameter it requires with the parameters of my signal, right? Just do it like this. I can also give it a name, trigger workflow for removing payment block. And if I now click on save and wait for the skill to be executed, then I will see, you will see it in a minute, that we have successfully integrated the workflow. That's actually everything I wanted to show. So let's just wait for this to be executed before we can deal with the use case part. And in the meantime, please do not hesitate to write or post any questions that you have in the chat of this webinar. So if I now go back to projects, to my signal list and the training signal, then I see that we now have trigger workflow for removing payment block. And if I click on it, the workflow is going to be started. It was only a one-step workflow, so it has now been executed successfully. And I think that is very, very powerful that we basically now bring together the process mining technology with the process analytics part to discover and derive intelligent actions, and the Action Engine with the concept of skills to enrich signals with actions, details, the routing, and the communication. And I think with that, you have a very, very powerful framework. However, coming back to our very initial question of optimizing working capital, you now have an easy mechanism to realize cash discounts. In the presentation that I will send to you, all of that is also explained. Something I have not mentioned, but that is very, very useful when you play around in the team yourself. I should mention it definitely once, is that whenever you are in any menu in your IBC team, you always have this what we call lifesaver in the bottom right. So when you click on that, you will basically receive always the possibility to receive help and context relevant information. So if I'm like in the skill menu and I click on that, I can search different topics, and you will also see in your team different questions that are being asked and answered. So always use the lifesaver if you need help, basically. Besides that, we have talked about the routing. So this is just for your information. We've talked about the actions, the communication. So now let me spend 10 minutes on use case categories and collection. I assume that you're now technically capable of working with the Action Engine. So the question now is, how do I put it into play? How do I discover what to do and which use cases to implement? And in general, I have one advice and one advice only, which is talk to your business at the earliest stage possible. So I've basically worked on dozens and dozens of customer projects, and I've recognized that whenever I talk to the business directly, they can actually quite easily at least express their pain points and explain the type of operational friction they have to face day by day. So that being said, I will talk to them. I will also show you how in a second, to basically collect the pain points and derive the use cases and the KPI impact from that. So that will be some sort of a bottom-up approach on the left-hand side. If you think about the top-down approach, this would also work. So you can, typically I bring together both process owner and operational users to also think about which KPI do we want to improve, as an example, working capital. How do we want to improve it? As an example, reducing throughput times. Where in the process do we observe the longest throughput times and the longest outliers? As an example, for our invoice release process. Okay, there you have it. That's your use case. So you should create a skill around releasing invoices on time. When you are talking to the business and when you're collecting these use cases, I will give you some examples in a second. But the template that I typically use, which I'm happy to share with you, is this one. The main purpose of this template is to quantify the use cases with respect to the value add to the business. So whenever I'm talking to the business and whenever we have collected a couple of use case ideas, I will ask them, do you have an existing solution for that in place? Yes. Okay, we should take another one. No. Great. What's the value add? The value add with respect to Action Engine typically has two dimensions. One is the time that is being saved, because the Action Engine automatically analyzes the data, communicates it to your business, and also helps in executing actions quickly. So it's a productivity gain here. And the second effect is a business impact. So what's the impact of a particular action on the process improvement? To give you an example, when thinking about the cash discount part, the business impact is simply the cash discount that we have saved by triggering the payment on time. Third quantification dimension is frequency. How often do these signals or incidents appear? Is it on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? And typically you would like to go for the daily one. Target audience. How many users are affected? Is this a very specific use case and pain point only one employee is expressing? Or is this something that's relevant to a large user group and really providing value here? So those are the 4 business criteria. And besides that, with the corresponding IT expert, I typically talk about, does the data model, the Celonis data model, already contain all necessary information, or do we have to enrich it by certain attributes? And also talking about the data reload frequency, how often do you currently refresh your data? So typically a daily data model reload is good for many use cases. But if you talk about these express or plain aviation maintenance use cases I've mentioned, you need a higher data reload frequency. We also at Celonis working heavily on, also for SAP systems, advancing in a technological way. And we're happy to support that for every customer who wants to achieve that. But it's, of course, one point that you have to clarify with the customer. As a second template, and then I will provide some examples. Once you have basically quantified the use cases, and once you have prioritized the use cases, and you have decided, okay, those are the 5 use cases that we want to implement at your company, then the last and final step before you can implement is basically the skill specification. So as I've mentioned previously, a skill consists of different elements, namely the signals, the details, the actions, and the routing. And for a particular skill, you should clarify this with the business users. So you should think about, how can I detect the relevant signals? Which information or details are relevant for you for taking and making a decision? Which action should we add to that? And what kind of workflows should be triggered? And also, how should the routing look like? And who should be the recipient of which signal? While those are templates that you can pre-fill, I can also provide you with some use case category examples that you can use to structure the exchange and to easier identify relevant use cases. And there are 5 exemplary use case categories that we typically tackle with the customer. The first one is about long runners to reduce working capital. The simple question is, where do you want Action Engine to help you avoid long runners? Be it for your release process, your purchase order creation process, your delivery creation process, whatever. So that's one plain category. And I won't bother you with the detailed examples. I can forward this and also many skill examples to you. The main question is just, where do you want to avoid long runners? Second use cases category is, where do you want Action Engine to help you meet on-time targets? To give you an example, in order to cash, you might have the delivery date that you have confirmed to the customer. And the question is, what do you now have to do for a particular customer order to have this order being delivered on time? When do you have to approve the credit check at latest? When do you have to create the delivery document at latest? So when do you have to do what to still meet this confirmed delivery date to the customer, to still meet this SLA in an IT ticket? And we haven't talked about that in the training, but with Action Engine, you can also take into account historic information to indicate which action to take at which point to actually meet the target. Third category is, in one word, master data. How to ensure master data is up to date. And what Action Engine can do there is it can compare your as-is process flow, like it can look at, as an example, the price changes that are being applied to your purchase orders, purchase order items, and it can many other examples. Fourth category is, we only have 2 more, don't worry. Where and how can you detect inconsistencies or invalid process flows? Just remember that initially, when we motivated the CFO example, we talked about them being concerned about regulatory requirements and compliance. So obviously, Action Engine can look for arbitrary process patterns, like inconsistent patterns, such as a mismatch in payment terms, or a supplier sending invoices before goods, any process arrangement you could think of, and it can detect that the time they occur and help you step into action to avoid this compliance issue, or at least correct it very, very quickly. In a similar way, you could think about how to recognize trend changes in the process. So whenever, just as one example, you have a company code for which you observe increasing maverick buying, so a change in trend with respect to that company code, you could generate a signal and work on that. And as a very last example, and before going on, just in general, you can derive all kind of data-driven suggestions that you can think of. So one example that we've implemented at a large customer as an example is about converting free text purchase requisitions to catalog orders. So this customer had the difficulty to handle hundreds and hundreds of free text purchase requisitions a day. And what we did is we implemented a skill suggesting suitable vendors for these free text purchase requisitions to help them save time in analyzing the free text orders and finding out the vendor themselves. That being said, let me spend the last 10 to 12 minutes also on next steps and Q&A to make sure that we also have a little bit time for the questions. First of all, I want to outline that there's a lot of material that I can provide you with to have a look at use cases and to enable you further. So actually I put down all the recent material that we have created, and I highly encourage you and your colleagues to have a look at it. In particular, there's actually an online training, a free of charge online skill training that you can easily sign up for. So it doesn't cost a thing, but it will also show you parts of what we have discussed today. So please forward it to your colleagues. It will also come with your own team and demo data. There are introduction videos if you just want to share the news or also look at the webinar, how Action Engine looks like from the business perspective. There are 2 videos on use cases and customer stories that we've created in the meantime. And there are a couple of product videos. As an example, if you're interested in how does it look like to trigger an RPA bot out of Action Engine? How does it look like to trigger actions in SAP? So please have a look at it. I think it's worth the read or worth the watch. Other than that, I just have one last call to action that I want to provide you with is namely, if you're interested and if you play around with it and curious about putting it into play yourself, please do not hesitate to contact your Celonis contact or also us directly at actionengine@celonis.com. So I think those are projects that can be implemented quite quickly. I'm doing that on a daily basis, more or less. And I'm highly interested in just building up an open-minded community for exchanging use case ideas, coming up with the best ideas to further improve the product and to finally provide the highest value to the customer. So in that sense, please don't be annoyed by me also approaching you after the webinar for some kind of like on-site meetings or use case workshops that you can participate if you're interested in. I just think that that's a very, very powerful technology that we have here, and technology itself is not yet a product. So it's only filled by you, by your content, by your use cases, and we should work on that to make it the best product possible. So that being said, let me have a look at the questions and also try to answer them spontaneously. Other than that, as promised, we will for sure come back to you and spread the answers to your questions among all of you. So I will just read them from top to bottom. The question is, one question here is, can Action Engine be configured only on Celonis analysis or other systems as well? So the clear answer is that an Action Engine skill is always based on the Celonis data model, but a Celonis data model can consist of arbitrary systems and also multiple systems. So you can combine different systems in one Celonis data model, and the skill then can then refer to that. Another question is, does the Action Engine also integrate with RPA vendors in order to have E2E automation? As you have actually seen in the workflows, the answer to this is yes. So the way we see the Action Engine is basically the intelligent trigger of bots. So we see Action Engine as a leverage to intelligently manage and to trigger the RPA bots that you or the client might already have in place. So in that sense, we see it as a powerful instrument to raise automation and bring together process analytics and RPA. Another question is, what can Action Engine do for a process other than order to cash or purchase to pay? That's a tough question because the universe is wide. Just to give you two exotic examples, as talked about, we have dealt with a very prominent airplane manufacturer, and there we are dealing with the topic of plane maintenance. And also the second example is when we think about scientific journals, we are working together with a scientific analytics company who is publishing scientific journals in large scale. And they basically want to look at throughput times and make sure that the journals are published on time. If we talk about Salesforce or other systems, then for sure, I mean, CRM is a huge topic. So for Salesforce, something I could think of spontaneously is providing your Salesforce with intelligent recommendations, which next step to take for a particular customer. So you currently have a sales opportunity, you're comparing the sales opportunity to similar processes in the past, and you're deriving the best recommendation, what you should currently do. Maybe you should call the customer, maybe you should schedule an on-site meeting, whatever, dependent on the past information of the process that you have. How does the user license model look like for the Action Engine? Good question. The simple answer to that is it's licensed by user. It's the one and only metric that's in place. So it's not limited in any way with respect to the skills or use cases. And obviously, if you have many users, then the price per user will be quite affordable. So what I want to emphasize here is all of us, and we in particular, want to provide as many skills as somehow possible and really collect the best and most powerful use case ideas, because at the end, we will have, and we want to prove that we can provide value to every single user that is way higher than the license fee that we charge for simply hosting this in the cloud and having this one and only fee per user. Question is, why can you only assign one signal to one assignee? I just want to emphasize that you can assign signals, or you can forward signals to multiple users. There's just always one assignee who is currently working on the signal, but these assignees can also forward the signals in between each other. That's actually very common for ticketing systems such as Jira and other ones. Sorry, there are many questions. I just can so many signals overload the system if the frequency of refresh is high? No, I would not say so. The simple logic being that the Action Engine execution logic is independent of the way you refresh your data. So for the refresh data part, obviously you have to think about, and that's what also we support, a delta logic that will make sure that you're only reloading the data that appears now and later. So you're not reloading the same data twice. So that's, I think, not putting a lot of load on the operational system. And what Action Engine will do is Action Engine will intelligently recognize whenever a skill has to be executed again. So we are not blindly executing skills every minute, but every minute we're basically checking whether there are new events that we should look for. So if nothing changes, we won't look for anything. And that's why also for large companies, and we are using it also on large data models, to my mind, it's quite performance, how would you say, cautious. Okay, let's just try to read the different questions. So one sec. One question is, I think that pops up frequently, is whether we can automatically trigger actions. So to be very transparent about that, what you've seen with the workflows is that now in the first step, we have provided the possibility to deeply integrate with the operational systems and trigger actions there. A second very natural step is to automatically trigger these actions. So I totally agree. But also, to be honest, that's currently in development. So as of today, you would have to wait for that a little bit. All right, so I think there are many questions, and I'm really grateful for this high interest, but I would also like to properly answer them to all of you and pick out the scalable ones here. So that being said, I would like the opportunity to thank you for your participation. Just want to emphasize one last thing, namely, if you have not received the invitation for the team email, please drop me a quick email to actionengine@celonis.com. celonis.com. And I will make sure that you get the team, and I will also forward you the recording and the solution sketch, so you can basically repeat all of that within 15 minutes for sure. So please drop me an email, and all of you should have the possibility to test it. And I really encourage you to talk to your clients, talk to your colleagues if you're a customer, and approach me if you're interested in anything. That being said, thank you very much. Enjoy your evening or morning in the US, and I will keep you up to date also regarding possible further webinars to take place. Thank you.